Well, good morning, y'all. Bright sunny day here in southern Michigan. Came out this morning and thought I'd offer up my take on religious matters. This was prompted by Prepping 101's live stream last night. Several topics discussed, and wanted to interject my own little bits in here for whatever they're worth. I know Bigfoot Prepper's got an upcoming Bible study in Revelation. Hopefully I've got time today before the Kindle runs out of room to make some comments that may be of assistance to him and the people involved in his study. And maybe I'll be one of them. There you go. But I do have some concerns and some things along the way, and not necessarily Bible studies or Bigfoot Prepper or anything like that. That's not where I'm going. But my problem is with Christianity and the Bible. I have a lot of questions. A lot of things I can't answer. Ironic, since back in my 20s, I thought I had all this mess figured out. So how things change. Give you all a little bit of backstory, and maybe I can help bring you up to speed on why I think the way I do about all this. I will be 52 in November, so I'm a child of the 60s. Conceived out of wedlock, which I'm not being critical of my folks on that. That stuff happens a lot, and I'm not judging anybody else on that regard either. But this does bring up the first issue that I have with the Scripture. And maybe we can talk about that. To hear my mother tell the story. She battled morning sickness pretty bad when she was pregnant with me. My dad was working either second or third shift at the time at a place called Continental Can, which was in downtown St. Louis. My old man decided one day he wanted to make it legal and take my mom up to the justice of the peace and get married. Mother battling the morning sickness told him, not today, or at least not right now, maybe after a while, if I'm feeling better, and he told her, okay, forget it. That was just my dad. He could be one of them. That brings me to a passage in Deuteronomy 23:2, and I will paraphrase it slightly off the King James. That an illegitimate shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. The problem I have here is that sounds like it's taking out on me the transgression of my folks. And there are other passages in the Old Testament as well that, to the 3rd and 4th generation of those that love me and to those that hate me, if you look at the Mosaic Law. And I wonder about that. How would any of you take being held responsible for the transgression of your folks, of a sibling, of a spouse, of your kids, anything like that? And yet in spots we're told that, we would give an account of ourselves. Just ask. I don't know. One of them things. But then I was told one day by a man I used to go to church with that this is the illegitimate at heart. They're the non-pure in heart. Well, okay. If you're not going to take a literal interpretation of that verse, then do you not take the rest of it literal? What then do you take as metaphoric or allegoric, and what do you take literal? Noah's flood, the crucifixion, any of that. Where do you separate one from the other? And in certain spots, it takes a more discerning mind than me to figure a lot of these things out. One man that's helped me on one side of this debate has been a man named Bart Ehrman. He's got a video on YouTube called Misquoting Jesus in the Bible. Runs an hour and 35 minutes. Makes some very good questions about the history of the Bible, the discrepancies in the Bible, errors that the scribes made, things like that. I think y'all need to check it out. Makes some very good questions, things that I honestly am not smart enough to refute. So I still struggle. But then on the other side, there are some really good preachers that have really helped me along the way. The late R.C. Sproul is one of them. He passed away back in December 2017. Very, very smart man. For those of you that believe in a pre-trib rapture, he's got a video on the rapture from more an amillennial perspective. Go check it out. Think about your own position in that, and be open-minded enough to consider another perspective. He's also got a video on the free will versus, what would be the counter of that? Almost fatalistic, where God is sovereign, God makes those decisions type thing. R.C. Sproul is what we call a Reformed theologian, as contrasted to dispensationalism. Dispensationalism has been around a couple of 100 years now, and was largely promoted by the Scofield Reference Bible. Depending on who you talk to, there are either 5 or 7 dispensations, depending, again, who you talk to. Where in Reformed theology, it's covenantal, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. And this is one of them things I wonder about too. Let me look at my notes over here. I wonder sometimes about 2 covenants or 7 dispensations. You have verses like Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ the same yesterday and today and forever. And the first part of Malachi 3:6. For I am the Lord, I change not. It would almost seem to me that we would have one covenant, one dispensation, one whatever, throughout the course of history, from start to finish, it would seem. And it seems like one of the songs I learned in the United Church of Christ dealt with that about, world without end, amen, that sort of thing. Things that make me wonder. Dr. Sproul did have a 12-part series that's on YouTube. Run about 20 minutes on Reformed theology. Really good stuff. Y'all go check it out. Some others that have helped me along the way, Sinclair Ferguson was one of them. He did a really good piece for Reformed Theological Seminary some years ago on the history of the Puritans. Very interesting stuff. Sinclair Ferguson, as I recall, was a native Scotsman. It seemed like Sinclair passed a few years back too. Had the very distinct Irish accent, or Scottish accent, well, whatever. But it made for interesting listening. The late Donald Grey Barnhouse, Presbyterian minister in Philadelphia from 1927 until his passing in 1960. Then James Montgomery Boice. He preached at the same church that Barnhouse did, only from 1969 until his death in 2000. Boice has a video on YouTube called A Brief Evangelical History and the Five Solas. Sola Scriptura, sola fide, faith alone, scripture alone, grace alone, that sort of thing. Another very smart man. Oh, goodness. Question was asked last night in the live stream about our views on what we thought our biggest problem God has with America right now. Several different opinions came up. Abortion, different things like that, being weak in the faith, what have you. Mine had to do with Christians not acting like Christians. And well, what do I mean by that? John 13:34 and 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you love one another. Now by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. Alright, question. What does that mean? Love some sort of sloppy, gooey, jumbled up mess, or what? I say it's more an action than a verb. Or a verb rather than a feeling. I'm sorry. I'll get it out of eventually here. That's the sort of thing where you look after one another. Take care of one another. Just like in Matthew 25:35 through 46. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. That sort of thing. We hear a lot in the conservative evangelical movement that Christianity is not a social gospel. I dare to disagree. Granted, it's not a mandate for salvation. That was done at the cross. But, again, how then do you deal with the John passage? You don't show your faith by just going to church on Sunday and dressing up and then living like the devil the rest of the week. That's another reason I left the church and walked away, and at times went very agnostic and even atheistic at times. And in many days I still struggle with that. Just giving you my 2 cents here. Now, on my good days, I do subscribe to Reformed Theology, much in the same way as Dr. Sproul and Dr. Barnhouse, Boice, and them. And, well, what does that mean? Well, for a lot of it, I'll let you refer to Dr. Sproul. He goes into a lot of that so much better than I could. Some of the chief differences that you'll see in Reformed Theology, though, versus traditional dispensationalism, they will vary on the rapture. Most Reformed Theology proponents do not believe in a pre-trib rapture and will even take a different view to the millennium. Most I've seen will be what is called amillennial. Do not take a literal view of 1,000-year reign. They will say that the 1,000 years actually started at the crucifixion, and that we're living in that day of the Lord right now. That goes back to Psalm 90, where one day as it was as yesterday, and night thy sight, and as a watch in the night, sort of thing. So they would take that more metaphoric or allegoric than literal. And that we are, in fact, right now in the tribulation time. That's not to say that things won't get rough or that Christ won't be back. He will, in fact, be back, according to this view. That comes from Acts 1:11. Where Jesus is taken up into heaven, and we're told that he would return in the clouds in the same fashion. And it is my belief anyway that if the scriptures and everything are true, that is when we will be caught up in the air to meet him. Per, 1 Thessalonians 4:11, 4:17, right in there. The wind has picked up some of my notes and blew them down on 4th floor here. I'm doing some of this off memory. That to me is when we will get caught up in the air to meet the Lord. Now, that will address the millennium and the rapture. Another view held in this position is that of Satan being bound the 1,000 years. Y'all will remember that out of Revelation chapter 20. My belief is that Satan is currently bound. And you say, well, how can you say that with the evil going on in the world right now? With the global sickness and all that. I would contend, how much worse would things on planet Earth be if he were completely free, being that he is all evil? That's my retort. And Revelation 20 does say that at the end of the 1,000 years, he will be freed to go to and fro, deceiving the nations, etc. It seems to me that would coincide pretty close with Acts 1:11 when we're caught up together. And to me, then the war is on, and we're heading pretty close at that point to the Battle of Armageddon, and the final end and the final judgment. That leads me to the final judgment, the Great White Throne. Many in dispensational trains of thought will say that Christians will not be there, etc. I don't know about all that. Now, take a look at many passages in the Old Testament. And again, my notes have blown on the floor, but there's something in the Old Testament known as Sheol, S-H-E-O-L. It appears a couple of times in Genesis, several times in the Psalms, a few times in Job. I think there's even a reference or two in Isaiah. This is the place of the grave. And at this point, in my view, the soul goes to one of two places. Think of it like this, that if you are arrested, okay, you go to jail. You're going to sit in the county jail or the city jail until you make an appearance before the judge. At which point, the judge will either dismiss the charges and say you're free to go, or you're going to prison. That's the thought behind Sheol. In the Old Testament, under the sacrificial system, you went to, what was then called Hades. Not a good place from my understanding. But then you go into something like the Apostles' Creed, where it says, and he descended into hell, okay, or Hades. That to me is my view where Jesus went to set the captives free at the crucifixion. To me, he did not immediately take them into heaven, as it were, as we think of heaven, but to what the New Testament refers to as paradise or Abraham's bosom, and I do think there's a distinction. Again, we still have this sin problem and what have you. And all of this is waiting for the culmination of history and waiting until we hit the Great White Throne, at which point everything will be reckoned out. Everybody's going to get judged, believers and non-believers. Okay? The non-believers, to me, will then essentially have the charges dismissed, and we'll have the separation of the sheep and the goats. The sheep will then come into the glory of the Father. The goats, well, y'all know the rest of the story on that. Again, just something to think about on all that with eschatology. Not saying any of you have to agree with me on that, but that is an alternative perspective. With that, folks, we're at 21 minutes. I'll wind it down. Thank you all for being with me. Thank you to the new subscribers that came in from Prepping 101, Christ is the Answer, everybody else, and I know I'm missing a few in there. Bear with me, my short-term memory has never been good. Thank you all for being here. Leave me some comments. Let me know where I can pick it up, how I can do better. Always wanting to be a good content creator here on YouTube. And with that, have a good Sunday, y'all.